Welcome to Learn English with Podcast. Today, our amazing hosts, Luca and Maria, are here to take you through another exciting episode. Luca, Maria, over to you.
Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. This is where we really get into the details of information that comes our way, trying to make sense of it all for you.
Yeah, unpacking the core ideas and what they actually mean in, the real world, their implications.
Exactly. And today's topic is, well, it's huge. It affects absolutely everyone. We're talking about personal boundaries. But hang on, before we dive in deep on that.
Oh, right. The quick housekeeping.
Yeah, just super quick. Putting these explorations together, really digging into everything, distilling it down. It honestly takes a ton of effort behind the scenes. There's a lot that goes into this analysis.
It really does. We spend a good chunk of time immersing ourselves, connecting the dots, trying to find the most valuable perspective for you. We genuinely enjoy it, but it is work.
We absolutely do love it. And your support is what truly makes it possible for us to keep doing this, to keep bringing you these detailed explorations. So if you're finding value here, if you're having those aha moments, please just take like 2 seconds.
Yeah, it helps immensely.
Hit that like button, share it with someone who might benefit, and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely makes a massive difference and lets us keep creating this for you.
Seriously, thank you. It means a lot.
Okay, so boundaries. Let's get into it. What exactly are they? Why do they matter so much? And maybe most importantly, how do we actually start setting them?
It's such a common struggle. And I think the first big hurdle, based on what we've been looking at, is just what people think boundaries are, the common picture.
Right. The immediate image that pops into most people's heads is walls, isn't it? Big, unfriendly walls.
Exactly. Thick, maybe even prickly fences, things you build specifically to keep people out, which, leads to this idea that setting boundaries is inherently negative.
Like it's cold or isolating or selfish even?
Yeah, all of that. It feels like you're just saying stay away. But the analysis we've done is really clear on this. That picture. It's fundamentally wrong when we're talking about healthy boundaries.
Okay, so healthy boundaries aren't walls. What are they then?
They're described more like invisible lines, or I quite like this phrasing, emotional fences. They're not about building barriers between you and others out of fear.
Invisible lines. Emotional fences. Okay, that already feels different. Less aggressive. So if their main purpose isn't just exclusion, what is it?
The core purpose is protection. But it's not just about protecting yourself from people in a defensive way. It's about protecting your space.
Your space. What does that encompass? It sounds like more than just physical space.
Oh, much more. It's incredibly broad. We're talking about protecting your time, which is so precious, your energy, which is finite, your core values, your emotions, even your sense of identity.
Wow. Okay, so it's about safeguarding all these vital internal resources.
Exactly. So that you can thrive, not just survive interactions, but actually thrive, both within your relationships and just in your own life.
So it's less stay out and more like, here's my space and here's how we can interact within it safely and respectfully.
Precisely. And this flows right into what I found to be the most, powerful metaphor presented in all this. Boundaries are bridges, not walls.
Bridges, not walls. Okay,
Yeah.
I like the sound of that. Let's unpack that metaphor. What's the deeper insight there?
Well, think about a wall. What does it represent? Separation, right? Division, often fear. A wall just screams, stay out. It's static. It blocks movement. It feels isolating.
And because we naturally crave connection, that idea of building walls feels wrong.
Yeah.
Which is probably why so many people avoid setting boundaries in the first place.
Exactly. We end up people-pleasing, saying yes when we mean no, overextending ourselves, tolerating stuff that really doesn't sit right with us, all to avoid building those perceived walls.
And what happens then? You get resentful, right? Burned out.
Totally. And ironically, the lack of external boundaries often makes us build internal walls anyway. We withdraw emotionally, create distance, close ourselves off because we feel overwhelmed or stepped on. So the wall metaphor, it actually kind of shows the negative outcome of not having healthy boundaries.
That's a twist. So how does a bridge represent a boundary? Bridges connect things.
Right. A bridge is built with purpose, with structure. It takes effort. But its whole function is connection.
Right.
It allows movement, crucially, two-way movement. It's designed to let people cross safely over something challenging, like a river or a gap.
Okay.
So the message of a bridge isn't stay out. It's more like, here's how we can meet safely. Here's the structure, the pathway for us to connect in a way that's secure and respectful for both of us.
Ah, I see it now. It's not about blocking connection. It's about defining the terms for healthy, safe connection. It's like an invitation, but with guidelines.
Yes, exactly. It says, here's how you can be in my life in a way that respects who I am, what I need, what I value. It completely flips the script from defense and exclusion to structure, mutual respect, and inviting a better kind of interaction.
Which actually strengthens relationships rather than weakening them. That's counterintuitive for a lot of people, I think.
It really is. But bridges enable connection without you having to sacrifice yourself. So consciously shifting from thinking walls to thinking bridges can make the whole idea feel less confrontational.
Yeah, less like you're pushing people away and more like you're inviting them into a healthier dynamic.
And it's a huge act of self-respect. When you build that bridge, you're teaching people how you expect to be treated. You're showing yourself that your time, your energy, your feelings matter.
Instead of just silently fuming when someone crosses a line, you never actually drew for them.
Right. You're actively guiding them onto a path of respectful connection. It allows people to meet you where you are, but on terms that are sustainable for you, not draining.
What about people who don't like the bridge? Who preferred it when they could just wander all over your space without any structure?
That's a really important point the analysis brings up. Not everyone will like your bridge, especially at first. If they were used to you having weak or no boundaries, your new structure might feel inconvenient for them.
So their negative reaction doesn't automatically mean I'm wrong.
Not at all. The analysis stresses this. If someone gets upset or pushes back when you set a limit, it often just means you're changing a dynamic that wasn't working for you. Their discomfort can actually be a sign of your positive growth.
Wow. Okay. That's a huge reframe. Their pushback might just prove the boundary was needed.
Exactly. Their reaction is about them adjusting, not necessarily about the validity of your need.
Okay, so boundaries are bridges, not walls. They're about respect, clarity, protection. What are the main sort of core purposes driving us to build these bridges?
The analysis lays out 3 key ones. The first is pretty straightforward: self-protection.
Shielding ourselves.
Yeah.
From what, specifically?
From emotional harm, mainly. From unnecessary stress, from toxic or draining dynamics. There's a good analogy used. It's like putting locks on your house.
Okay, that makes sense.
You don't lock your doors because you assume everyone's a threat, right? It's just a standard measure to keep unwanted intruders out. Boundaries do the same for your mental and emotional space, keeping out harmful behaviors or draining patterns.
Creating a secure inner environment. Got it. What's the second purpose?
Clarity in relationships. Boundaries are essentially how you teach people to treat you.
Like giving them the instruction manual.
Pretty much. When you communicate your limits clearly, you remove ambiguity. People aren't left guessing. This reduces confusion, prevents resentment from building up silently, and helps build honest, functional relationships.
Because resentment thrives in that gap between unspoken expectations and what actually happens.
Exactly. Assumptions are breeding grounds for conflict. Boundaries clear the air. And the third core purpose, which is maybe the most fundamental, is self-respect.
How does setting a boundary relate directly to self-respect?
By setting a boundary, you're making a powerful statement both externally and internally. You're saying, my needs matter, my feelings are valid, my time and energy are valuable. They aren't things you're obligated to just give away freely. Honoring them is a choice you make for yourself.
That internal message, my needs are valuable, feels really key.
It is. The analysis highlights that without boundaries, we often end up abandoning ourselves. We say yes when we want to say no, we stay quiet when we need to speak up. This leads straight to burnout, resentment, feeling disconnected.
Whereas having boundaries keeps you grounded, connected to yourself.
Yes. You feel more in control, more able to make choices aligned with your values, not just reacting to others' demands.
Okay, so protection, clarity, self-respect. Makes sense. Now, the analysis also breaks down boundaries into different types or dimensions, right? Depending on what kind of space they protect.
Exactly. It outlines 5 key types, which helps us pinpoint where issues might be cropping up. They are emotional, time, physical, mental, and digital boundaries.
Let's just go through them. First up, emotional boundaries. What kind of space are we protecting here?
This is about protecting your feelings, your emotional energy, and your sense of self, especially when faced with other people's intense emotions or unhealthy emotional dynamics.
So stopping yourself from becoming an emotional sponge.
That's a perfect way to put it. Creating a healthy container so you can empathize without getting totally consumed. The examples given are really practical.
Like what?
Like saying no to someone who constantly dumps negativity on you without considering your capacity, refusing to be manipulated by guilt trips, being selective about sharing deeply personal stuff, and importantly, knowing when to step away from conversations that become yelling matches or feel abusive.
That last one, knowing when to disengage, feels crucial.
Mm.
Why are these emotional boundaries so vital?
Well, the analysis explains that without them, you basically absorb others' negativity. You end up feeling constantly overwhelmed, heavy, anxious. This can lead to burnout, codependency, where you feel responsible for fixing everyone's feelings, or just deep resentment.
So they give you space to manage your own emotions.
Exactly. And decide how much energy you actually have to offer. How do you set one? The examples focus on I statements.
Can you give me an example?
Something like, I care about you and I can listen for a little while, but I'm feeling drained myself, so I can't take on all of this right now. Or a simple, I'm not comfortable discussing that topic. Or if things escalate, please don't raise your voice like that. If this continues, I'll need to step away.
Clear, calm, focused on your own limit.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the next type?
Time boundaries. As the analysis points out, time is arguably our most finite resource. So these boundaries protect your schedule, your priorities, your capacity.
Preventing that feeling of being constantly pulled in a million directions.
Absolutely. Avoiding being stretched too thin, having to sacrifice your own rest or personal time. Examples include saying no to extra meetings or social events when you genuinely don't have the bandwidth.
Setting clear work hours, especially if you work remotely.
Yes. That's a huge word. And consciously prioritizing personal time, rest, self-care, instead of feeling like you have to be available 24/7.
This is where the guilt really kicks in for a lot of people, isn't it? Feeling bad for not being instantly available.
It is. And that guilt is precisely why these boundaries are so important. Without them, you risk running on empty. People might start expecting your time as a default. It's a direct path to burnout, feeling used, and just general dissatisfaction.
How do you say no to a time request politely but firmly?
The examples are direct and brief. I finish work at 6 and won't be available after that. Can we pick this up tomorrow? Or, I need to leave by 3 today to stick to my schedule. Or simply, thanks for asking, but I'm not able to take that on right now. No long excuses needed.
Concise. Okay, next up, physical boundaries.
These relate to your personal space, your body, your physical needs like rest, food, privacy. Seems obvious, but these are crossed surprisingly often.
Yeah, personal space bubbles vary so much.
Totally. Examples include not wanting hugs or touch without consent, asking for more space in crowded situations, needing alone time to physically decompress, and also honoring your body's limits, saying no to physical exertion when you're tired or unwell.
That last one is interesting, respecting tiredness as a physical boundary. And why are these so important?
The analysis is quite direct here. Violations, even seemingly small ones if repeated, can cause real emotional discomfort, anxiety, even trauma over time. Everyone has a unique comfort level, and it's crucial to respect that in yourself and others. Your body is yours.
How do you set one?
Usually direct statements about your immediate need. I'm not really a hugger, maybe a wave, or could you give me a little more space, please? Or I'm feeling really wiped out, I need to go rest.
Simple and clear. Okay, what about mental boundaries?
These protect your thoughts, opinions, beliefs, your mental space. They help you maintain your own perspective, your intellectual integrity.
So you don't just automatically agree with everyone to keep the peace.
Exactly. Or start doubting your own beliefs just to avoid conflict. Examples include choosing not to engage in pointless circular arguments, respectfully disagreeing without feeling pressure to change your mind, refusing to be gaslighted or have your reality denied.
And limiting time with people who are constantly dismissive.
Yes, strategically limiting exposure to people who disrespectfully shut down your views. The analysis notes how easy it is to feel mentally drained or invalidated these days. Mental boundaries preserve your headspace, allowing for healthy discussion, not just aggression or manipulation.
How do you phrase a mental boundary?
It often involves acknowledging the other person's view while holding yours. I understand your perspective, but I see it differently. Or, to end a going nowhere debate, let's agree to disagree on this. Or, this conversation isn't feeling productive for me right now.
Useful phrases. And the last one, very relevant today, digital boundaries.
Hugely relevant. These are about setting limits on screen time, online interactions, social media, digital communication, protecting your focus, your emotional health, your privacy online.
Managing that always-on feeling.
Exactly. The analysis points out how draining constant connectivity is. Examples include turning off notifications during certain hours, not feeling obligated to respond to texts or emails instantly, avoiding online arguments, being mindful about what you share online.
That pressure to respond immediately is intense.
It is. And it leads to feeling overstimulated, fragmented, exhausted. Digital boundaries give you back control over your time and energy, creating space for real life.
How do you communicate one?
Pretty straightforward statements. I don't check work emails after 7 p.m., or I'm taking a break from social media for a bit, or please don't post pictures of me without asking first.
Okay. Emotional, time, physical, mental, digital, that covers, well, pretty much everything.
It really does. And the key insight is they all work together to create a more balanced, peaceful life aligned with your own needs. Honoring these isn't just self-care, it's modeling healthy behavior. And if people consistently don't respect them,
That tells you something important about the relationship itself. Back to the bridge metaphor, maybe they aren't willing to cross respectfully.
exactly, you have the right to protect your peace.
So we know what they are, the different types. But how do we actually know when we need one? The analysis talks about an internal alarm system, right? Using our body and emotions.
Yes, this part is fascinating. It frames certain feelings and physical sensations not as problems, but as signals. Your body or emotions often register that a boundary is needed or being crossed way before your conscious mind does.
Like early warning signs. What are some key ones?
There are 10 main indicators listed. The first is feeling constantly drained or exhausted.
Not just tired from being busy, but that deep emotional fatigue.
Precisely. It comes from giving too much energy without enough reciprocity, like always being the crisis person for everyone, but nobody checks on you.
Yeah.
Feeling wiped out after specific interactions is a big clue. It's a signal about sustainability.
That sounds incredibly common. What's another sign?
Feeling anxious around certain people or situations, that knot in your stomach, mentally rehearsing conversations to avoid conflict, that's often your body's warning system.
So that anxiety isn't just random, it's a message.
Absolutely. It might mean you're scared to say no to that person, you worry about disappointing them, or you just don't feel safe expressing your real needs around them. It's a red flag saying something in the dynamic needs to change.
What about resentment? That feeling of simmering anger.
Feeling annoyed or resentful often is a huge sign. Resentment builds when you consistently ignore your own needs to accommodate others, saying yes externally while screaming no internally.
That internal conflict.
Exactly. The analysis says it's not necessarily about hating the other person, it's a signal you've let things slide too often. Ask yourself after agreeing to something, did I really want to do that? If it's a hard no, a boundary was probably needed.
That's a good self-check. And guilt. Feeling bad for saying no.
Feeling guilty for saying no or even just thinking about it is another big one, but the analysis reframes this beautifully. Guilt in this context often isn't about doing something wrong. It's usually learned conditioning.
Like you were taught that good people always say yes.
Right. So when you start prioritizing yourself, guilt is the programmed response. It's actually often a sign of growth, of breaking old patterns, not a sign you're being bad. The discomfort is part of the process.
That's a really important distinction. What's number 5?
Feeling invisible or unheard. When your input is ignored, your voice doesn't carry weight, people just steamroll over your needs or decisions.
Like being constantly interrupted or stating a boundary and having it just brushed aside.
Exactly. Over time, this erodes your self-worth. Feeling invisible is a sign it's past time to speak up, assert your presence, and draw a line about being heard and valued.
Okay, halfway through the signs, what's next?
Being always on call. This ties into the digital boundaries. Feeling pressured to be instantly available, dropping everything for a notification, feeling guilty for not replying immediately, being the default for every emergency.
Your phone feels like a leash.
Perfect description. Constant availability doesn't make you more valuable, it just makes you depleted. Everyone needs time off from communication demands. If your time doesn't feel like your own, you need availability boundaries.
And related to that, the next sign.
You're overcommitted and underappreciated. Saying yes too often out of obligation, fear, or guilt. Juggling way too much work tasks, favors, social things, and then feeling exhausted and taken for granted.
That feeling of being used, basically.
Yes. Generosity without boundaries isn't sustainable. If your schedule is packed and you feel undervalued after giving your time, you need to reassess and start setting limits.
What about losing your sense of self?
You're losing touch with yourself, spending so much energy on everyone else's needs that you forget your own desires, interests, purpose.
Becoming a passenger in your own life, just reacting.
Exactly. Boundaries help you live from the inside out. Without them, you risk feeling disconnected from who you really are.
We mentioned conflict earlier. How does that fit in?
Being often in conflict or misunderstandings, frequent arguments, miscommunications, passive-aggressive patterns can signal that needs aren't being communicated clearly or they're being ignored.
Like the classic roommate argument about chores that could have been prevented with a clear boundary.
Precisely. Instead of letting resentment build to an explosion, a clear boundary stated early, "I feel stressed when the kitchen's messy, can we agree to clean up right after eating?" prevents a lot of conflict.
And the last sign.
Feeling trapped in roles you didn't choose. Finding yourself stuck being the perpetual fixer, the yes person, the therapist friend, the peacemaker, when you never actually signed up for that role.
And feeling like you can't escape that box.
Huge red flag. You are allowed to redefine your role even if others resist. Boundaries are the tools to help you break free and be your authentic self.
So these 10 signs: drained, anxious, resentful, guilty, invisible, always on call, overcommitted, losing touch, frequent conflict, trapped in roles that they aren't just random bad feelings.
Not at all. The crucial takeaway, really emphasized, is that these feelings are messages. They aren't mistakes or flaws. They are your internal system signaling a need for change, a need for a boundary. Learning to listen to them is fundamental self-respect.
Listening to them is honoring yourself. That makes perfect sense.
Exactly. They're telling you it's time to protect your peace, reclaim your energy, and set healthy limits.
Okay, let's really focus on that link between boundaries and well-being. The analysis argues they aren't just optional extras. They're essential for mental and emotional health.
Absolutely foundational, like sleep or nutrition for physical health. One major way they help is by preventing burnout and exhaustion.
That energy bank account analogy.
Yes, it comes up repeatedly. Your energy is finite. Demands are withdrawals. Without boundaries acting as a budget, you end up in overdraft, overwhelmed, irritable, exhausted. Boundaries help you manage that energy wisely.
Avoid emotional bankruptcy.
Right. And beyond just energy levels, they actively protect your emotional health. The analysis calls them emotional armor.
Emotional armor. How so?
It helps you distinguish between your feelings and responsibilities and other people's. This is vital when dealing with difficult or manipulative people. Without that armor, you absorb their negativity, feel responsible for their moods, feel guilty for things that aren't yours. Boundaries keep out the emotional junk.
So you're not constantly carrying everyone else's emotional weight.
Exactly. And this separation directly reduces anxiety and stress. Constantly trying to please everyone or avoid conflict by sacrificing yourself is exhausting. It keeps you hypervigilant, on edge.
Always braced for impact.
Yeah. Setting clear boundaries lowers that mental load dramatically. You're not solely responsible for everyone else's reactions. That cuts down baseline anxiety.
But what about that fear? That setting boundaries pushes people away. Is that true?
It's a common fear, but the analysis says it's largely a myth. Healthy boundaries don't push the right people away. They attract the right people and encourage healthier dynamics. They foster mutual respect.
So the bridge clarifies the path for respectful connection. And if someone doesn't like the bridge,
maybe they weren't a healthy connection to begin with. Allowing boundaries to be constantly crossed actually builds resentment and weakens relationships over time. Boundaries prevent that erosion.
So if they're so beneficial, why is it so hard for people to set them?
Several deep reasons explored. Fear of rejection or abandonment. If I say no, they won't like me. Guilt conditioned to believe saying no is selfish. Low self-esteem, not believing your needs are valid. And cultural or gender expectations that might discourage assertiveness.
Powerful forces working against it.
They are. Understanding them is the first step to unlearning the idea that boundaries are bad. Because at their core, they are acts of self-respect.
And the analysis links setting them directly to strengthening self-esteem. How?
Every time you set a boundary, you send yourself a message. My needs matter. My time is valuable. I am worthy of respect. This internal validation builds self-worth. The more you practice, the more confident and self-assured you become.
It's like finally seeing and validating yourself.
Precisely. People who struggle with self-esteem often feel defined by serving others. Boundaries help them feel seen, first by themselves, then by others who start treating them differently. You develop a stronger sense of identity.
The analysis also gave some concrete examples, didn't it? Workplace, family, friends.
Yes. Workplace. Setting clear hours, like not answering emails after 6 p.m. and communicating that politely. Protects against burnout. Family. Limiting calls with a consistently negative relative, perhaps suggesting professional help if needed. Protects your emotional energy. Friendships. addressing imbalance with a friend who only takes and never gives, communicating a need for mutuality.
So it's about adjusting the interaction to be healthier, not necessarily cutting ties.
Exactly. And the analysis reframes it as kindness. Giving from resentment or depletion isn't truly kind or present. Boundaries let you give from abundance, from choice. They prevent passive aggression and blow-ups.
Being clear is actually kinder in the long run.
Absolutely. Allows for real connection.
Okay, we've covered the what and why. Now the crucial how. There's a practical 3-step formula presented.
Yes. Simplifies it into actionable steps, stressing it's a skill you practice. Step 1. Be clear and kind.
Sounds easy, but probably tricky with all that fear and guilt floating around.
Definitely. The goal is to state your limit unambiguously, but without blaming or attacking. Kindness helps the message land without making the other person defensive. And use I statements, not blaming you statements.
Can you give that comparison again?
Instead of you talk too much and drain me, say, I need some quiet time alone after work to recharge. Or I find it hard to have heavy conversations when I'm tired right after work. Focus on your need.
Got it. Your need, express kindly. Step 2.
Don't over-explain. This is a super common trap. You finally say no, then feel you need to give a million reasons why.
To justify it, make it sound okay?
Yeah, or to seek approval. But you don't owe a long explanation for honoring your limits. Over-explaining just invites debate or guilt trips.
So if you can't make it to a friend's thing because you're exhausted,
Just say, thanks for the invite, I appreciate it, but I won't be able to make it tonight. Polite, direct, end of story. Practice simple responses. That doesn't work for me. I can't commit to that right now.
okay, clear and kind, don't over-explain. Step 3 must be the tough one.
Hold the line. The hardest, but most crucial. After you state your boundary, expect pushback or testing.
People checking if you really mean it.
Exactly. They're used to the old way. If you give an answer the late email, do the favor after saying no. You teach them the boundary isn't real. They just have to push.
So if the colleague texts after hours anyway, you just wait.
Wait until your stated work hours, then respond. Maybe gently reinforce. Saw your message this morning. Just a reminder, I'm offline after 6 p.m. You consistently stick to it. You're retraining them gently but firmly.
And this is where the guilt monster really shows up.
Yeah. And the analysis says, feel the guilt. It's normal. It's growth. It does not mean you're wrong. Remind yourself, I'm allowed to protect my peace. Their reaction isn't my responsibility. My needs are valid.
Those self-reassurances are key. Yeah. So the formula, be clear and kind, don't over-explain, hold the line.
It's a practice. And because it can feel so daunting, the final crucial advice is start small.
Start small. Why is that so important?
Because trying to overhaul everything at once is overwhelming. It's like running a marathon untrained. Setting boundaries builds emotional stamina. You need practice.
Gradual change is less shocking for everyone involved.
Precisely. It prevents panic in you and gives others time to adjust. It's gentler and more effective long term.
What are some practical ways to start small?
One great tip is replacing yes with let me get back to you. Buys you time. Creates space to check in with yourself before committing.
Instead of that automatic sure.
Exactly. Let me check my calendar and I'll let you know. Breaks the instant compliance habit. Reduces overcommitment.
That's brilliant. Simple but powerful. What else?
Practice in safe spaces. Try small boundaries with trusted people. First, close friend, supportive sibling, partner, lower stakes.
People you feel safer being honest with.
Right. Simple things. I'm really tired. Can we reschedule our call? Or I need an hour quiet time tonight. Builds confidence.
What about using digital stuff to practice?
Setting digital boundaries first is often easier. Less direct confrontation, big impact. Turning off notifications, setting email autoresponders for off hours, letting people know you won't reply instantly. It's empowering.
And I statements are still good for starting small.
Especially good. I feel or I need feels less accusatory when you're just finding your voice.
Keeps the focus on you.
Yep. And finally, declining small favors first. Saying no to big things is scary. Practice with low-stakes stuff.
Like not lending a book, or saying you can't chat during your downtime, or telling a neighbor you're too tired for their request.
Perfect examples. I'd prefer not to lend it. This is my recharge time. I'm not up for that right now. Small acts that reinforce your right to say no.
And dealing with the guilt that comes up even with these small things.
Acknowledge it, expect it. It's normal. It's a sign you're changing old patterns, not being bad. Discomfort often means growth, not wrongness.
And tracking the small wins helps.
Absolutely. Notice every time you paused, protected your time, declined politely. These aren't small wins emotionally. They build confidence, show you the world doesn't end, and let you see the positive impact, less anxiety, less resentment.
Each small act builds self-trust.
Fundamentally, reinforces I matter, my energy is valuable, I can say no and still be okay. It builds that internal validation so you rely less on external approval. Start small, build a solid foundation.
This whole conversation really brings us back to that core idea. Protecting your energy is a sacred act.
It does. Energy is finite, precious. Boundaries are the guardians of your well-being. They're like power-saving mode. You choose where your energy goes and where it doesn't.
Saying no is self-preservation, self-respect, not selfish.
It's emotional hygiene. Creating space to rest, recharge, replenish, like locks on your emotional and energetic doors. Not everyone gets full access.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Protecting your energy is about being sustainable, not selfish. It means you actually have something genuine to give when you choose to. Saying no to things that drain you allows you to say yes with presence to things that matter.
And it helps with focus, too.
Yes, constant demands scatter your attention. Boundaries filter distractions, protect your mental space, let you be more present and effective where you choose to be. You shift from reacting to intentionally directing your energy.
And that initial guilt does fade with practice.
It really does. Replaced by self-respect, peace. Energy boundaries lead to healthier relationships built on mutual respect, preventing those draining one-sided dynamics.
Ultimately, it's about choosing what matters most.
Precisely. In a noisy world, boundaries let you direct your precious resources intentionally towards a life aligned with your values. Intentional living, not just reacting.
This has been such an illuminating deep dive. Seeing boundaries as bridges, understanding their purpose, the signs we need them, their link to well-being, and crucially, how to start small.
They really are about self-respect in action. Protecting your peace, time, and energy isn't a luxury. It's fundamental self-care.
It feels like we've truly uncovered some vital truths, boundaries, as essential bridges for health and relationships, rooted in self-respect.
Well,
Protecting your energy as a sacred act.
it's the foundation for a sustainable, peaceful life that feels like your own. Choosing yourself without guilt, building connections that truly nourish.
So, based on everything we've explored today, the types of boundaries, the signs you need one, how to start small, here's something to think about. What is just one small bridge, one tiny, clear, and kind boundary you can begin to build in your life this week? Where do you feel most drained or disrespected? What's one small step you can take there to protect your peace and honor your energy?
Take that first small step. Your well-being is definitely worth protecting.
Until the next deep dive.
Emma had always been the kind of person who said yes to everything, whether it was staying late at work, helping friends with last-minute favors, or answering texts at all hours. She never wanted to disappoint anyone, but lately, she felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and even a little resentful. One Friday evening, after yet another late night replying to work emails, Emma realized something had to change. She started paying attention to how certain situations made her feel drained or anxious. She noticed that when she agreed to everything, her energy felt like a phone battery slowly dying. That was when Emma decided to identify exactly where she needed boundaries, starting with her work emails after 6 p.m. Next, she got clear on her needs. She told herself, "I need to disconnect after work to recharge." The following day, Emma calmly communicated this to her manager. "I won't be available for emails after 6 p.m. I'll make sure everything urgent is handled during work hours." She didn't over-explain or apologize, just clear and kind. When a colleague pushed back, asking her to check messages later, Emma stood firm. "I understand it's busy, but I really need to respect my downtime to be my best at work." It was uncomfortable at first, but she held the line. Over time, Emma noticed her guilt fading. She practiced self-compassion, reminding herself that taking care of her energy wasn't selfish. She adjusted boundaries as needed, and slowly, she felt more peaceful and energized. Emma's journey taught her that healthy boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to better self-respect, relationships, and a happier life.
Thank you for watching. Your journey to better English and unstoppable confidence starts here. Like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep growing together. See you in the next video, champion.